Good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Patrick Smith of the organization HR Kyle. And today we're going to be talking about crafting the perfect resume to land your dream job as an immigrant. Again, as I said, my name is Kyle Patrick Smith. My organization is HR Kyle. I'm an author, consultant, and professional speaker. The topics that I most typically cover are human resources and leadership. If you'd like to learn more about me and my organization, please visit hrkyle.com. So relative to the topic today, I want to start off by addressing two main subjects. One, why is it important? And two, how does it impact job seekers? Well, you'll hear me say this a couple of times during today's presentation, but the resume gets you the job, the resume gets you the interview gets you the job. So a well-crafted, well-designed resume is your ticket in to be able to talk to the employer and let them know all that you have to offer them relative to the job. So put another way, if your resume isn't well crafted and it isn't well designed, you won't even have the opportunity to talk to your potential employer about why they should hire you. So how does it impact job seekers? The resume is a critical first step in your job search. So in other words, having that resume in a very sound position, ready to secure interviews, is the step that you need to take before you start your job search. Here are the items that we'll be talking about today. One, employer expectations in the U.S. One thing that we know about job searching is it looks very different from different parts of the world. Processes and approaches and documentation and so on that may well work effectively in one country may not and probably won't work effectively in another. We'll talk about the resume structure. So literally talking about how you should structure your resume from a visual standpoint. And I will share some visuals with you on what to do and what not to do so you can get a good picture of what your resume should look like. We'll talk about the professional summary. This is typically found at the top of the resume, and it provides a nice overview of who you are and what you have to offer to the employer. We'll be sure that we highlight your key skills. This is important that these are listed on a resume, and I'll talk about how to effectively do that and why this is important. And of course, we'll talk about showcasing your work experience, because that's what your possible future employer, the person that's reviewing your resume, that's what they're going to want to look at. But we want to present it in such a way so that they are able to look at it easily and get to the information that they need. And of course, because I'm talking with an audience that is part of the resilient immigrant family, I want to make sure that I address international experience. One, so that you realize that it's important, but also making sure that you present it effectively in your resume so the experience can be appreciated for the value that it brings. We'll talk about education and certifications and how to present those on your resume. And then we'll talk about the dreaded applicant tracking systems, which so many companies use to accept your resume and actually conduct the first review of your credentials. But again, we will talk through that to tell you how to be much more effective in navigating those applicant tracking systems. And then we'll talk about cover letters as well. Those are important in many cases, along with your resume when you're submitting your information to a potential employer. And then finally, we'll wrap things up today talking about the resume checklist to be sure that you have a list when you're reviewing your resume and you've made all these wonderful updates to be sure that you've gotten everything covered. So let's get into the topics at hand. I've said this a couple of times today, and I'll probably say it a couple more. The resume gets you the interview gets you the job. Please don't confuse the two. They do very different things, and to accomplish this, they must look very differently. And that's what we'll talk about today. We'll be talking about the resume to get you the interview. So let's talk first about employer expectations in the U.S. For one, employers in the U.S. expect a resume that has clarity, meaning clarity behind where you've worked, what you've done, your job titles, the dates of your employment at those particular organizations. It's also looking for that same level of clarity when you talk about your skills, as well as your training, your licensures, and your certifications. It's also critical that it come across very professional. This is a professional document, and that may differ from some cultures. In some cultures, it's important that your personality also come out in the resume. However, in the United States, we put much, much less influence on that when building your resume. And then finally, be sure that the content in the resume is relevant. In the US, what makes a resume relevant is if it helps the person reviewing it make a decision on whether it's worthwhile to bring you in for an interview for the position that you're being considered for. So we must make sure that the content of the resume is very relevant to the position that you're wanting to be considered for. Results. We're especially looking for resumes that demonstrate that you've delivered results. And when you think about results and how to express those, you want to express those using the acronym SMART, which means that you're specific, you're listing measurable results, they're relevant, and they're timely. And also, please, with that A, make sure that they're accurate and it's something that you can convey in a story in the resume. So again, as you're creating your resume and you're listing the content, we're looking for results, and we're looking for results that have those components. They're specific, they're measurable, they are attainable, so it's something that you did attain, they're recent, and they're timely. Brevity. Resumes in the US, keep in mind, are typically reviewed by a person no longer than about 20 to 30 seconds. And yes, you heard me correctly, 20 to 30 seconds. Using brevity in the content that you include in your resume will allow the reviewer to take the necessary time to understand your credentials and be able to compare them to what they're looking for in the position that you've applied to. If a resume does not have brevity, typically the reviewer will pass on that resume without ever considering the skills and experience that you bring. And you may ask, why does this happen? Well, for most positions, the person reviewing the resume for that job may well be looking at 50 to 100 resumes. So they're just not able to take any longer than about 20 to 30 seconds to review your resume. So it is critical that you exercise brevity in sharing your information. Next point, when designing your resume and considering the content, please make sure that it's geared towards what you can do for the employer, not what the employer can do for you if you're hired. And please follow the same advice when you get an interview and you're answering the employer's questions. But again, designing and building that resume, be sure that the wording is geared towards and directed towards what you can do for that employer if they hire you. Be sure that it's easy to read and easy to look at. I will share an example here in a moment to illustrate what I'm talking about relative to that point. This is also important in the US, and I know that this is a cultural difference between different countries. In some countries, it is encouraged, in fact, to share personal details such as marital status, gender, and those type of things. In the US, that is considered inappropriate. Please do not share that information on your resume when applying to positions in the US. Also, in the majority of cases, it's recommended that you not include a picture on your resume. And again, in some cultures, some of you listening out there, you may come from places where a picture is very commonplace. But in the US, we don't, for most positions, consider a picture on a resume to be a positive thing. In fact, in many cases, it can be looked upon negatively. Also, it may be tempting, but please don't include fancy fonts. Use fonts that are easy for the person to read. Again, referring back to my previous point about brevity. If the individual reviewing your resume is only going to be able to take 20 to 30 seconds, it needs to be in a font that's very readable. Fonts that I would recommend are Arial, Times New Roman, and Tahoma. Those are all considered professional fonts, and they're easy to read. Also, avoid paragraphs in your resume. So paragraphs where you're talking about your experience or you're talking about something that you've done. Again, with the 20 to 30 seconds that it's going to be reviewed, there won't be time for people to read a paragraph. And again, I'll show you in the upcoming slide what that can look like. Also, crammed in content. As I've said a few times already, the resume is designed to get you the interview. The interview is designed to allow you to get the job. So on your resume, you're providing a preview, much like you would a preview for a movie that you're considering. The preview for the movie provides just enough information to catch the person's attention, hit on topics that you want them to understand and to draw them in. They then watch the movie to get the full content. Your resume is the same thing. But again, let's look at an example here in a little bit. Let's talk next about resume structure. First and foremost, include your contact information at the top of the resume. In the US, it is appropriate to include the following contact information: your full name, city, state, and zip code, phone number, email address, and LinkedIn address if you have LinkedIn. And by the way, I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, to create a LinkedIn profile. Let me go through that list again. Your full name, first and last, city, state, and zip code, your phone number, your email address, and your LinkedIn profile. Notice that I did not say include your street address. That is not necessary to be included on your resume, and I highly discourage it. Knowingly or unknowingly, that can provide the reviewer to discriminate against you based upon where you live. So please do not include your street address as part of your contact information in your resume. Secondly, your professional summary. I'll provide more detail here in a little bit on what that should look like. But in thinking about the resume structure, the professional summary is directly below the contact information. And the professional summary is also the one time when it's okay to include a paragraph, but it's the one and only time. Below that are your key skills. Again, I'm going to give more detail on how the key skills should be laid out and what I'm talking about key skills. But again, as you're thinking about the structure, contact information, professional summary, and then key skills. Next, we should see your work experience on your resume. Below that, or following that, is a section that's devoted to your education, training, and specific certifications. And then finally, if it is relevant to the job that you're applying to, I encourage you to include any volunteer work that you may have done. Again, if it relates to the job that you're applying to, I would encourage you to list any projects. Individuals that typically would include project information on their resume would be those in the computer science area. They are most often, most likely to include project examples that they may have worked on relative to computer science. And then finally, if it is relevant to the job that you're applying to, languages that you speak and your competency level with those languages. Again, if it is relevant to the position. It's assumed with your resume that you are English speaking and that you also understand English at a high competency level, both written and verbal. So there's no need to include English on your resume. Again, let's look at what that structure looks like in practice. Here's an example of a bad resume. You'll see in this example, the person includes a lot of paragraph, a lot of verbiage, a lot of information. In fact, I've only included the first 2 pages of the resume. This person actually went so far as to have a 10-page resume, which I highly discourage. Your goal is to have a resume that's no longer than 3 pages. However, if you have less than 3 years of practical work experience, your resume should not typically be longer than 1 page. If it goes beyond 3 and it's under 10 to 15, it's typically going to be 2 pages. If it extends beyond 15 years of experience, that is the only time that it would go 3 pages. But that's considered the exception, not the rule. Most typically, the resume needs to be 1 to 2 pages. What you'll also notice with this resume is it's not easy to review. There's not a lot of white space. Things seem jumbled together. It's very tightly packed. This person attempted to include everything possible relative to their jobs. So in other words, rather than the movie preview, they want to show you the whole movie. And when your resume is being reviewed, it's not being reviewed to be watched as an entire movie. At that point, it's the movie preview. So there's the bad example. This was a client that we worked with recently as part of my organization, HR Kyle. And with this resume, we updated it so that it looks like this. And you can see a drastic difference in what you saw before. And I'll go back so you can see that. There's this version, which would absolutely take longer than 20 to 30 seconds to review. And typically what's going to happen as soon as someone looks at that, they're going to toss that resume aside. Versus this one, which quite easily could be reviewed effectively in 20 to 30 seconds. And as you can see, it has all of the sections that we spoke about a couple of slides back. It has the first and last name, city, state, zip, phone number, and email. From there, the professional summary, which is in paragraph form. It has the technical skills and the employment history. And it appears like I may not be able to see my slides. So again, I'm going to move forward, putting them in this format so everybody can see them. So let's talk about the professional summary. I let you know that that should be, from a structural standpoint, directly below the contact information. The professional summary is a summary of your key strengths, experience, and value to employers. So again, you're speaking to what you can bring to them. Please keep it concise. It should not be any longer than 3 to 4 sentences. It will typically have your job title or your experience level, so the area that you've worked in, years of experience, as well as industry, if that is relevant. It will highlight your key skills and your strengths, and it will reference major achievements and the impact that you made. And if I may, I want to go back just a couple of slides to show you, in the example I provided, what that might look like. If you look here on the good example with the professional summary, you'll see that the person says they are a results-driven marketing leader, et cetera, et cetera. But to highlight that even further, and by the way, please be sure that your professional summary is based on your employment history. As funny as that may sound, I've seen some people create a professional summary that has nothing to do with their employment history. So please don't fall into that trap. But here's a really good example of a professional summary. This person says they are a results-driven project manager. So there's the job title. 7+ years of experience. So there's their experience level. The areas that they've worked in: supply chain, leading cross-functional teams, and advising on strategic operations. They're adept at, so these are their skills, implementing process improvements that enhance efficiency and reduce costs. So now we're talking about tangible things. They have a proven track record of managing large-scale projects, delivering on time and within budget, and driving lasting business impact. Everything they've stated here is an overall summary of the resume, but it provides the reviewer a quick reference to be sure that this person possesses the knowledge, skills, and experience that they're looking for. So again, it enhances our ability as a hiring manager, as a hiring company, as an HR person, to quickly look at your resume and make a decision whether we'd like to proceed. This is why I highly encourage you to include a professional summary at the top of your resume. I mentioned earlier about key skills. That's the section that's below the professional summary. In this case, you're talking about tasks you performed. You're using skills, and I always say here tangible, not fluff. And what I'm speaking about there is so many individuals include organization, leadership, communication, and so on. Those are, of course, skills. But every candidate I talk to has organization skills, leadership skills, and organization skills. In the US especially, that's taken for granted that you would include those, so it's a waste of time to include them. Plus, as an interviewer, I will make an evaluation based upon the questions and your response as to whether I see that you demonstrate those skills. So simply by you including them on a resume or saying that you have those, that's not proof that you possess those. During the interview and the stories that you tell, the interviewer will make a determination whether you have those skills. So including those on a resume is, in fact, a waste of very valuable real estate on your resume. What you want to include are skills related to systems and tools. That's what makes you stand apart. That's what the interviewer is looking for. Examples might be Microsoft Office applications, Canva, tools like that. That's what we're looking for on the resume. There are also things that might require advanced training, certification, and or licensure. Let me show you what that looks like on a resume. You'll see the skills section in this example is actually to the right. But what you will notice about the skills section is everything that's listed there is very tangible. They are things that this particular individual attained a certification on, a particular coaching method that they follow, different training courses that they've taken, and so on, that again are measurable and tangible. And that's that entire section. Even where we talk about interpersonal and professional skills, which in some cases could be seen as fluff, these, in fact, include actual tangible skills: HIPAA compliance, patient-centered mediation, therapeutic conflict management, and healthcare client relations. All areas that would require more of an advanced training to have these skills versus organization, time management, and so on, which do not require any sort of training, certification, or anything of the like. Work experience. When you're listing your work experience, please be sure that you are focusing on accomplishments, things that you've actually done, things that are measurable. Also, be sure to use action verbs. Those demonstrate that it's an action, an act that you've taken. Be sure that they're quantifiable. Again, as I mentioned, versus fluff. These are things that are measurable. Someone can ask you about them. You can demonstrate the results. Be sure, too, that these are included in a bulleted list because they're much easier and quicker to review. And then finally, rather than using paragraphs, incomplete, choppy sentences are okay. Let me show you an example of what I'm speaking about. Here are 3 examples of work experience taken from a client's resume that we work with. One of them led a team of 7, so there's measurable, to implement a 360-degree go-to-market strategy, again, measurable, driving a 30% increase, measurable, in brand consistency and audience reach across digital, public, and physical channels. Again, very tangible, measurable things for a multi-million-dollar market. Again, tangible and measurable. The second example, spearheaded. That's an action verb. E-commerce, digital marketing initiatives. Again, those are actual areas, including SEO, SEM, and advertising. Again, measurable areas. Search engine optimization is SEO. Search engine marketing is also SEM. But again, those are measurable, resulting in a 40% growth in customer reach and a 20% increase in online sales. Again, tangible, measurable things. And then finally, the last example I want to share, built and launched. Action verbs, something you did. It's very tangible that you did this. A comprehensive partner program. So there's an actual job task. Increasing engagement by 40%. There's our measurable again. Reducing onboarding time by 30%. Supporting a 650 plus customers across 40 countries. Again, all job related, all job tasks, responsibilities, and all very tangible and measurable. International experience. If you are an immigrant on this call, you do in fact have international experience. Please be sure that you don't overlook that. Immigrants are a population that I work with quite a bit in my work with resumes and cover letters and career coaching. And one thing that I have found with my interview population is they tend to downplay their pre-US experience. Please don't do that. Your experience prior to coming to the US is just as valuable and just as relevant as any work experience that you gain in the US. And I want to repeat that one more time because those that I work with tended to downplay and devalue their experience. Please don't do that. Your experience prior to coming to the US is just as valuable and just as relevant as the experience that you'll gain in the US. Be sure, though, that you translate the terms and terminology for your particular job or role that you held in another country into US terms. Many times, the easiest way to do that is simply review the job posting for your job in the US. And you may need to translate as well the job title to a US job title in order to find your job. So it may require some extra searching, especially on Google, to find out what is whatever your job title was called in the US. And that's probably the easiest way to figure out what your job title from your prior country is called in the US. From there, then you can go to any job site, do a search. So that will help you do your job search, but it will also help you find the appropriate terminology for your job. And then you'll want to make sure that terminology is what appears on your resume when you're talking about your experience. Be sure to identify skills, duties, and accomplishments that are transferable. We always want to see those on there. And again, I'll say what I said earlier. You do have skills, duties, and accomplishments that are transferable. Again, it may require doing a Google search to see where they're transferable or how the wording is used in the US for the tasks that you did. In addition, some degrees may translate differently into the US. For example, I work with a gentleman who is from a country in the Middle East. Over there, he was a medical doctor, and he attained a certain degree classification that made him eligible to be a medical doctor there. That same eligibility doesn't exist in the US. However, it doesn't diminish the level of education that he received. So what we did on his resume was we made sure, and I made sure, that I understood the meaning of his degree from his home country, and I translated it effectively into what that would mean in the US. And this has made his job search much, much easier, because many people that will review your resume here in the US may not understand the meaning of certain terms or certain degrees or certifications from your home country. So it makes it necessary for you to do that translation for them so that it appears on your resume. Education and certifications. First point I want to make here is please list relevant degrees and certifications. If you're applying for certain jobs and you have degrees and certifications that are completely in a different area, more than likely those will not be relevant to the job you're applying for. It may be fine to include the degree. However, if it's a certification conducting yoga, for example, but the job that you're applying for is in customer service, including that certification yoga probably isn't relevant. And again, getting back to something I said earlier, include information on your resume so you don't clutter it. So if you're including information that's not relevant to the job that you're applying to, that represents clutter, and it keeps the person reviewing it from seeing the information that's really relevant to the job that you're applying to. Please include any credential evaluations where possible. And again, this may relate back to how your education from your home country is interpreted or understood in the US. So if there's any sort of credential evaluation, please include that along with your education and certification. One of the more common examples that I will see is where a certain country has a different grading scale that maybe is based on a scale of 0 to 10. In the US, our grading scale from a GPA standpoint is a scale of 0 to 4. So when you're listing your GPA from your home country, you will need to put a note in there that translates that to what its US equivalent is. That's one of the most common examples that I see. And that is especially true, that I've noticed, for our friends who are from India and Pakistan. Many times the grading scale that's used there is a 0 to 10. So we find it necessary to take that and translate it to what the US equivalent would be on the 0 to 4 scale. Please also include ongoing training and workshops that you're attending, especially if they are relevant to the job that you're searching for. Again, many of my clients who are immigrants to this country will have a lapse in time between when they left their country and their last job and now. And sometimes that can be as long as 6 months to a year. Well, during that period of time, I'm hopeful, and you should be, still keeping your skills sharp by attending trainings, by attending workshops, and so on. Be sure that you include those on your resume. It demonstrates that during that downtime, after you first came to the US, that you were still active and making an investment in your career. Applicant tracking systems. I'm sure many of you out there have probably heard of them. In essence, what an applicant tracking system is, that's a system, an automatic system that scans and ranks applicants. This is why it's so important that you use the job-specific keywords. And again, make sure that they're US-based. You include the measurables, and that you create a document that's easily scannable. If you're missing those components, your resume will be scored lower, even if your skills are there, even if you have the skills. But if you don't effectively convey them in your resume, the system, which is automatically scanning it, will not pick them up. What that means to you is A human will never look at your resume. It will never reach that step. And there are many companies, a large percent of companies that you apply to when you apply online, your resume goes into one of these applicant tracking systems and it does that initial scan and it's looking for those keywords. It's looking for the measurables that we talked about earlier, and it's looking to see if it can go through the document easily. It's also why we want to use more bullet pointing than we use text. Cover letters. Again, the topic today is about resumes, but in many cases, when you submit your resume to be considered, they also ask, sometimes require, sometimes make it voluntary, that you include a cover letter. I highly encourage you, for any job that even makes it an option to include a cover letter, I highly encourage you to do that. Okay? As I said, some jobs require them, some jobs don't. But if it provides you the opportunity online or via email to include a cover letter, please be sure that you do. My best piece of advice to you, though, make sure the cover letter is job application specific. So it needs to speak to the job that you're applying to. How does it do that? Well, it includes a greeting. If you don't know the person that the cover letter is going to, you simply put hiring manager. If you do know the person's name, put their name. And by the way, here's another cultural difference. In the US, it is perfectly acceptable and really expected that you will use the person's first name. Now, I know that may go against some of you, your comfort level. You come from countries to where if you haven't formally met the person, it's considered disrespectful to use their first name. I want to respect that, but I also want to let you know that in the US, it's acceptable to use a first name for someone that you haven't met yet. And in many cases, it's expected that you will. Please indicate your reason for sending the resume. So you're letting them know that you're sending a resume because you saw a particular job that was located on a particular website that you are very much interested in. And then connect your background to the job posting. So here, in essence, what you're doing is you've got your resume and the job posting side by side, and you are picking out things from your resume that you're seeing in that job posting. So you're helping the person go through that analysis process. That's why I love to have cover letters included, because now you've made their job easier. They're asking for certain skills and certain experience and certain training and certifications. And guess what? You have those, and you're letting them know that in your cover letter. And then at the end, and this may seem obvious, but we expect this in the US, let them know that you're highly enthusiastic about applying for this job and being considered further. And then let the person know in the cover letter the best ways to reach you. And I'll show you an example of this here in a moment. But the best ways are your phone number and your email address. Be sure that that is included in the cover letter. And in fact, for the cover letters that I work on for my clients, I include it in the body of the cover letter. I also include it in the signature line. So it's very clear how to reach that person. Here's an example cover letter. As you can see at the top, dear hiring manager. So we did not have a name of the person that's going to be looking at the resume. Then you can see it says, I am writing to express my interest in this position at this company as advertised with dual masters. So immediately I'm getting into my experience or my client's experience in this case, because this is what they're looking for in the job. And they're talking about their experience in sales operations, data analytics, and compensation strategy. Again, those are things that are being looked at. They're being referenced in the job posting. And then here's the connect the background to the exact job posting in my recent role. So now you're getting into specifics of your experience as it relates to the job posting. And you can see throughout there, I'm hitting on measurables, I'm hitting on tasks, I'm hitting on tangible things that demonstrate my ability, or in this case, my client's ability to more than exceed the expectations for the job that's being filled. And that's the 3 paragraphs. And then at the end, as I shared, you're expressing interest. Thank you for considering my application. I'm excited about the opportunity to discuss how my skills and experience align with the needs of your organization. Please feel free to contact me at phone number and email to schedule an interview. So there's a call to action. And here again, there's the sincerely, the person's first and last name, and yet again, their phone and email. We want to make it easy for the person reading the document to reach out to you. I want to wrap up today's discussion to provide you some resources that are available to you. Each one of these resources is available to you at no cost. I highly encourage you to check these out. The first one is Career One Stop. This was created and it's maintained by the U.S. Department of Labor. It provides tools for job searching, career exploration, and finding training opportunities. There is material within that website that is specific to immigrants. So please take some time to review that. Another site that I want to draw your attention to is Upwardly Global. Again, this is provided by a nonprofit here in the U.S. known as Upwardly Global. So there's their web address. This organization aims to eliminate employment barriers for skilled immigrants and refugees. Again, this content is specifically geared to those that are on this call today, helping them rebuild their careers in the U.S. Again, think about some of the things that I talked about before. You have wonderful skills and experience from your home country. We want to make sure that you effectively translate those to the U.S. market so people can see your value and what you bring. And then finally, I've listed my website, hrkyle.com. I have many free resources out there, including a podcast that I conduct each week, a YouTube channel that I populate on a regular basis, as well as a blog. These address all topics related to job searching. And again, these are available to you at no cost. So please take the time to check these out and take advantage of these resources that are out there just waiting for you to use. Let's go through our final resume checklist. So you've taken my advice up to this point and you've worked on your resume and you've got it in what you think to be great shape. Let's take a stop here now on this slide and ask yourself these questions. Do you have a clean and professional layout based upon what I described? Is it easy to scan over your resume and get to the information that I want and that I need to make a decision if I want to interview you or not? Do you have a strong professional summary? And I showed you an example of what that looked like. I also gave you some advice and guidance on how to structure yours. Do you have a skills section that includes your tangible skills? Things that you are really good at, you've received training on, that you're very effective at doing. Again, these are tangible skills. Have you quantified your achievements? Are there achievements on there that someone can look at and clearly understand and recognize the value that you will bring to the role that they're considering you for? Have you made sure that your resume is ATS friendly in its formatting? So is there adequate white space? Have you included keywords and other terminology that the system is looking for as it compares your background to the position that is open? Have you also checked your resume to be sure that there are no spelling or grammatical errors? We're fortunate that we have tools such as Microsoft Word that will do this checking for you. I highly encourage you to use these resources before saying that your resume is complete. The difference many times between you getting an interview with an organization and not can come down to your ability to be sure that you have sent a very clean resume without spelling or grammatical errors. And then finally, where required or where made optional, have you built a customized cover letter that speaks specifically to the job that you're interested in relative to the skills and experience that you bring? That is your resume checklist. Once you can successfully work through that and confidently work through that checklist, you are now ready to apply to jobs of interest to you. One more thing I really want to remind this audience of. Again, I'm speaking from experience with the many immigrants that I work with as part of my business and I have over my 26-year career. There are plenty of employers who are immigrant friendly. That means we want you to apply. That means you will have a place that you can consider home relative to where you work. You will be treated with respect and dignity. You will be part of something bigger. You will be part of a team. And you will have a wonderful opportunity to express your skills and to grow and develop as a professional, as a person. Please remember that. There are plenty of employers who want you to apply and will make sure that you do extremely well and that you have all the opportunities that you're deserving of. Please seek out those employers. I would ask the group, take a second as we sit on this slide. What's one thing? And you may have many, many things, and I hope you do. But ask yourself right now, what's one thing that you will take away from today that you believe you can use immediately as you undertake your job search here in the U.S.? We'll take just a moment for you to consider that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say, let's please connect. One of the strongest tools that you can utilize in your job search, especially in the U.S., is your ability to network and connect with professionals. I am one of those professionals that I love to connect with others. And I have a special place in my heart for those who are immigrants to the U.S. It's one of the reasons why I volunteer with Resilient Immigrant. So anything that I can do to help you in your job search, I am more than willing to do that. And sometimes one of the best things that I can do is make you available to the rest of my network as they have job openings. So again, my name is Kyle Patrick Smith. My company is HR Kyle. We help people navigate what we call the world of work, which is part of what we spoke about today. My website is hrkyle.com. And I hope you have a LinkedIn profile. If you do, please look me up and connect with me at the HR Kyle. So it's linkedin.com/in/the HR Kyle. Other than that, I want to thank you for joining the workshop today and best of luck in your job search. And I look forward to connecting with you.